The Salem Witch Trials judges admitted all kinds of wacky evidence that we wouldn't bring into court today. And we're going to talk about that here on The Thing About Salem. I'm Josh Hutchinson.
I'm Sarah Jack, and our ancestors experienced the Salem Witch Trials.
Sarah, I want to start this show with a riddle. When is a doll not a doll?
Our listeners and watchers who've joined our Patreon community already know the answer. But I'm going to go ahead and spell it for everybody. It's when a doll is a puppet.
Yes, that's right. Exactly. One of those.
When a doll is a puppet.
One of these.
I see yours are made from clay.
Mine are from clay. What's yours made out of?
Filament. 3D.
3D printer?
But it's not about what they're made of, is it?
No, it's the intention with which they're made that makes the difference in whether they're used to harm or to help.
We have a lot to say about the Poppets in the Salem Witch Trials. And depending on why you know what you know about the Salem Witch Trials, the first Poppet that might come to mind is in the Crucible, which is fiction. But Mary Warren gave Elizabeth Proctor a puppet that she made while she was in court being afflicted.
And then Elizabeth Proctor got arrested for it, and Mary Warren didn't. So there you go. That's justice.
So that is a crazy Poppet story. Are the real Poppet stories less crazy?
Not really. They're quite wild. They start with a 15th century magic book called the Liber de Angelis, the Book of Angels. It has a great example of one of these methods. It shows a spell, includes how to make this particular puppet, which is called the Vindicta Troy, or the Vengeance of Troy, and crafted very carefully and intentionally to harm somebody.
And you can learn about that in Tabitha Stanmore's book, Cunning Folk, which you can buy in our online bookshop at bookshop.org/shop/andwitchhunts.
Yes, please enjoy the wide selection of witch trial and related books.
A puppet is image magic, and you mentioned intention.
Intention is the key to what the puppet does and how it works, whether it's being protective of its creator or whether it's used to harm somebody who's got on the creator's bad side.
One of the historians that I heard speak about this talked about them being little helpers. And I thought, that's a really good way to look at it. But dolls and puppets are a deep part of our culture and heritage over the centuries.
And as we mentioned, some of them are used as evidence in the Salem Witch Trials and in witch trials before Salem.
Cotton Mather wrote about a witch trial that was just a few years before Salem, the trial of Goody Glover. Cotton recorded her story, and he described her puppets as rags filled with goat hair. And they brought that magic into the court as evidence against her, and she acknowledged them. According to Cotton, she used her spittle to stroke them.
What happened when she struck them?
It was a magical experiment that was happening in that courtroom, and the afflicted Goodwin girls saw her hold the puppet in court and were afflicted.
Yes. Allowing the witnesses to see the experiment and then see what happens with the witnesses. That sounds like sound procedure to me.
Also in Boston, Anne Hibbins was a woman that stood trial for witchcraft. Unfortunately, she was hanged. They did search for puppets. They did not find puppets at her house.
And the puppets show up in the Salem Witch Trials right out of the gate. The very first arrests that are made, Sarah Osborne and Tituba, their property was searched for puppets and images to see if they were doing any image magic. and nothing was found. But that puppet search was ordered by the magistrates because they were using a book by a man named Joseph Keeble called An Assistance for Justices of the Peace for Easier Performance of Their Duty. And it says in there, quote, "Besides, upon the apprehension of any suspected, to search also their houses diligently for pictures of clay or wax, etc."
So who had them? Did everyone? There were a lot of accused. Were some of them dolls?
And several of the afflicted people said that their witches that were bewitching them came spectrally, but brought them real puppets that they were instructed to harm so that they would be harming other people in the community. So, for instance, George Burroughs, John Proctor, Ann Prediator, and Alice Parker were all said to offer puppets to the afflicted girls and try to compel them to use them. And Mary Warren said that when Alice Parker brought her a puppet, she said, "You stab this in the heart, or I'm stabbing you in the heart."
Abigail Hobbs, who was a confessor with some of the best stories, said the devil brought puppets to her. So she just went straight to the master of the Salem takedown and said he just brought him right to her.
Right to her, bypassed all the witches and all the middlemen and just brought her the puppets because apparently she could talk to the devil and call him up just as easily as she could call up a neighbor.
She was really confident about that.
Yeah. But puppets, we talked about how there was this strange evidence brought into court. There was very little in the way of physical evidence produced. There were a few ointments that were found, and there were puppets that were found. And on at least 2 occasions, the puppets were brought into the courts.
The type of evidence is really a strong part of the injustice that happened. You can split hairs over the formalities of how court was run and if their rights were upheld that they would have had. But when you look at the physical evidence, and these are the things that were evidence against them, it's so unjust.
Yeah, the other evidence that was used, the chief evidence, was spectral evidence, which was the testimony of the afflicted people saying that they had seen the specters, not the actual people, but the specters of these alleged witches afflicting them. And so that was the key evidence. The other evidence was things like hearsay and conjecture and reports of, 20 years ago, I had an argument with this person. They said something mean to me, and then my cow got sick. So this is the kind of evidence that passes as proof that these people are afflicting through witchcraft. It's very flimsy.
Like a rag doll, like a rag puppet.
Yeah, and speaking of rags and puppets, an interesting thing happened on July 4th, 1692. A woman named Candy is brought into court for her examination. Now, she's an enslaved woman. She belongs to Margaret Hawks, Mistress Margaret Hawks of Salem, who also was charged with witchcraft and arrested at the same time. But when Candy's under examination, the magistrates ask her, "What are these tools that you're using to afflict people? Can you bring them into court?" And they actually send somebody out with her to go back to the Hawks house and find some puppets and bring them into court. And according to one source, she presently brought in 2 cloths, one with 2 knots tied in it, the other 1. And then another source says she brought in a handkerchief wherein several knots were tied, rags of cloth, a piece of cheese, and a piece of grass. And all of these things qualified as puppets. You see, the image that you're making of your target individual doesn't have to be accurate. You just have to have that intention that this is that person that's being represented, and what I'm doing is transferring to them. That's how puppets are understood to work. So the magistrates, in their infinite wisdom, decide to have more experiments done in the courtroom, just like with the Goody Glover trial. They order Candy to swallow the blade of grass, which that itself sounds absurd to me. But according to Minister John Hale, who reported on this in a book several years later, Candy was burned that night. She felt burned in her flesh after swallowing that piece of grass. Then the magistrates dipped a rag puppet in fire, and the afflicted persons who were there all said they were burned on their arms. But again, the afflicted persons are present and they see what's happening and they know how to respond. Then the rag puppet gets dipped in water and the afflicted people choke and gasp, and one runs towards the river.
Which in the crucible, they do also run towards the river.
Yes, they do. That part, I think that they borrowed from this incident.
So the magistrates are playing with magic in court?
The magistrates are playing with magic. It's really bad for people like you and I to do it. But if you're a judge, hey, have at it. Why not?
Other puppets that you have to hear about allegedly belong to Bridget Bishop, who unfortunately was the first person executed during the Salem Witch Trials, and the anniversary of that death is coming up on June 10th.
Sadly so. Yeah, on June 2nd, the day that Bridget was tried, John Bly Sr. and his son William Bly come in and testify about something that happened 7 years earlier, when William Bly, by the way, was 8 years old. They testify that Bridget Bishop hired them to do some work on the cellar of the house she was living in at that point in time. And they're down in the cellar and they pull open one of the walls and there's puppets there. And they're made out of rags and hog bristles. And they're full of headless pins with the pointy ends sticking outward.
They found the worst kind of puppet there, allegedly.
Allegedly. They didn't bring it into court. It was 7 years before. There's no, drawings of it that they brought in. There's no representation at all. So nobody but them knows what they saw.
Bridget denied that they were hers.
Yeah, she wasn't the original owner of the home. Her husband had actually bought it off another man. And so it's very possible that somebody else put it there when the home was built or during another renovation in the cellar.
Thank you for tuning in to learn about the puppets of the Salem Witch Trials with us today. Do you love puppets or dolls? We would love to see what you've made or you have. Please come to our Patreon and talk about it, post about it, or share it on social media and give it the hashtag Salem Puppets.
And like Sarah said, please go to our Patreon. You can join our community there and talk with us and with other fans of The Thing About Salem in the community chat forum there, and check out all of our posts. We've got videos, photos, behind the scenes look, deleted scenes. We've even got a full version of our first episode that's an alternate version not released to the general public for your listening pleasure only.
We appreciate any membership you join at. We want you there, and there is a free membership that does include exclusive content.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of The Thing About Salem.